Hi, Alan. Nice to see
Hello,
you.
Serena. I think we're here because shortly after you actually gave me the paintings that you made, I said that I loved them so much that I would be happy to uh, have a public conversation with you about them. In case anybody else is interested in your process, which I think is an amazing process. And so we haven't rehearsed this at all, and we decided that this was going to be a spontaneous conversation rather than a rehearsed interview, which I think is good. I find that your work it doesn't have an imitative quality to it. It's accessible, which I love about it. Um, it doesn't feel to me like here's someone who did something which I'm supposed to not understand, and that was is what is supposed to make it wonderful that I don't understand it. Because also as a musician, I'm interested in making music that is really true for me, and in the conviction that if it is true for me, it will be true for many other people as well. Um, and um, speaking about the symbolic or the iconic level of the work, which we'll see in a minute, one thing that I really love about what you did is that you didn't translate this into, let's say, kind of well-known cliches of archetypes. Like, I know, oh, this is the picture of me as the animus. This is the picture of me as the shadow. People who are reading a lot of Jung or post-Jungians, which is a very interesting perspective in literature and art world. But it can also mean that those figures sort of impose themselves where they're not really helpful, or where they reduce the meaning in a work rather than expand the meaning. And so I have this feeling of archetypes in in the background of the work, but not an imitation or a conscious trying to turn a photograph into a certain variation on a well-known archetype. And that's important to me. I didn't know actually how you would deal with that issue, and I'm really glad that you dealt with it the way that you did by sort of discovering iconic levels in the photos that I sent you rather than
Yeah.
turning them into something else.
I was reflecting on this yesterday, and I was thinking about how the process again creates that. If I had, I'm having a conversation with the artwork. That sounds a bit crazy, but it happens.
Of
Every
course.
artist can prove that that's true. I realize when it's becoming something that it's a formula, and I try to avoid that, or something that has already been done on some piece of knowledge that hasn't gone through my critical thinking and my own experience, and it's not the way I have connected the parts of the process and the knowledge in it. And another thing I do, I try to think about being somebody who doesn't know anything about this.
Hmm.
So for a moment, I just forget that I'm me. And I pretend to be somebody who doesn't know anything about painting, about art, about the subject that I'm painting. Um, and that really works. It's like showing what you're doing to your 6 years old.
I think that kind of secondary naivete, not your earliest naivete, but a, a re a re-achieved naivete later in life is extremely important in so many things. And I'll just share with you a little anecdote, an experience that I had composing a number of years ago. Oh, this is almost 40 years ago now. A filmmaker, an experimental filmmaker, asked me to play the Mozart sonata, piano sonata K310, the minuet over and over again, which is this da 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 dum bum bum da da dum in dum ba dum ba ding dee dee dum. And he said to me, play it over and over again. Try to play it exactly the same way each time. I played it for about maybe an hour without stopping, over and over again, really. And then he made a film which attended to every tiny little nuance and difference that there was in timing, all the things that are below the threshold of what normally we listen to in music, because even shifting around on the piano bench and the piano bench creaks for a moment, or I breathe at a certain place or something. He translated all of that into this film that he made. And it
Wow.
was amazing to me to realize because he's not a trained musician, he could just hear the whole sound rather than imposing a kind of a musical grammar on it and saying everything which is, you know, at a lower level or more fine level of resolution than that isn't really meant to be. It's a mistake or it's unintentional. He treated everything as intentional. And I think I learned from that experience what it means, you know, how non-musicians hear music, that they really hear everything. And as musicians, we often think, well, musicians are the ones who really hear the music. But actually, we hear music that's gone through such heavy filtering of our training, whereas non-musicians usually don't have all of that filtering. And I think something similar happens here. That you know you try to kind of remove the filtering that says this is visible, this is not visible, this matters, this doesn't matter, and in a way be naive again about what matters and what doesn't matter.
In a way, you are being naive. In another way, you're really trying to select what you want to stay.
Yeah,
It's like deciding what are the most important things in your life. You do that with an artwork. You're
of
like, what
course.
are the real priorities? Okay, I love these two colors together, but what's the real thing that I need to say? Because that's the only thing that hopefully will stay in time, you know?
Yeah,
It's, it will live longer than us, the art that we make, and that's probably why we do it.
amazing. This is actually, this is not only the six works, but this is exactly how they are hanging from my wall over my shoulder. I wanted to read the works and get a feeling myself for how to put them together. And then I remember when I showed it to you, you know, you appreciated very much and said that it made a lot of sense to you how I had put them up.
Yes, and also what you said, it's exactly what I have. The heads are trying to reply to the question, what can we learn from Alan's behavior? I think that you took really good choices in your life, and they were not just for your own well being, but for other people's as well. And I try to investigate that in various ways. I mean, I've studied a lot your music, your work. I read about what you've done. I know that I am less than half of your age, so I there's only a certain amount of research that I had a possibility to access. So I don't know that much about you, but everything that I've learned, I try to condense it in these three pieces. I was really impressed by how you managed to run your program even during COVID, and how you found solutions for so many other musicians and people working in the arts, and that to me was a really good starting point for this reflection. The other three pieces are trying to reply to the question, what can we learn from your life? So they are more, that's more about your life. It's a sort of healing journey. It's like the summary of like three key phases of your life. That's what I have interpreted. Looking at all of the photos that you sent me and the music that you made, and everything else that I have accessed. They kind of connect with each other, of course. They're not too different. You can see also chromatically the colors go together. So I would say this is just one piece made of six pieces. I have the way I have structured the work is that I've designed the images just with some kind of collage work, a bit of drawing on paper. When I started to paint them on the canvas, I've started to work on all of them at the same time. I had them around the house, and I was like looking at them almost every day, even if I wasn't painting on them every day. So I kind of never stopped processing them.
And I love relating to the works themselves. I think what I'd be happy to talk about for the moment is, if you would like, is the three other paintings, and just to let people know what how I see what they show, if that's okay. And then it would be fun to see if that's what you think they show too.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I'm happy to.
So we'll start with this one on the far left. on the screen in the pink circle and the blue outerwear, where most people don't recognize that that's me who have seen it, because people don't know what I look like when I was 15 years old. That's a photograph of me when I'm 15 years old, or even maybe a little bit younger than that. And embedded in that photo, there is a photo of myself with my father. And very interesting that you put those hearts on there and that you erased our faces. And that has a very deep meaning to me, which is a little bit too personal to go into. But that was something, it's kind of amazing that we never talked about my father and me in that way. And you somehow picked up on a very important psychological truth about us. And then on the lower, the right and the left side of the painting, there is my sister and me. I'm kind of, I don't know if it's so easy for people to see that that's a baby on the right there. That comes from, it's one of my favorite photos of my whole life, of my sister and me lying on a bed when I'm probably about a year old, not more than a year. My sister, I think, is 7 or 8 years old there. And I love that photo because well, I love my sister very much. And it's just for me, absolutely a photo of a perfect, happy childhood. So, and then what goes along with this is the dog, which is a Chihuahua. That's very funny that you painted the dog as well. And I like it that there are these sorts of, I don't know what to call this, like colors, streams of being that are pouring out of me and my father and the dog into this world. You know, on the one hand, it looks to me like they're informing the world, and on the other hand, it looks like they're threatening that world a little bit. I mean, there's this idyllic image of my sister and me on the bottom, and then there's some stuff going on there, and there's the adolescent Alan looking on over all of this, and the question is, where is this going to go? It's like those are the ingredients, and what's going to happen with this story, like being introduced to the characters, and where is that story going to go? It's like a synopsis of a 20-year long Netflix series that is right there in that one photo. Of course, the only person in my family that you didn't portray in the one on the left was my mother. But here now is my mother, and she's in a kind of an MC Escher-like relationship to my life partner. And what's funny is that for a long time, I thought, and everyone thought, that my partner, who's a Japanese woman, could not be more different from my mother, who is a Polish Jewish woman. But actually, they've grown closer and closer to each other over time, in a way, physically, spiritually, and so forth. And somehow you manage to capture that in a way that my partner and my mother are kind of flip sides of each other, without really knowing either one of them. I mean, you know Sayumi a little bit, but you never met my mother. I'm pretty sure we never talked about that very much.
No.
Yeah, so you picked up on something there and put that in this painting, which is also a little bit scary to me, to tell you the truth. And then the person in the middle there, of course, that's me, and I'm in my early 20s. I took this photo intentionally as a publicity photo. It was back in the mid 19, when was it? Let's see, probably 78. I think I was 23 years old. I'd only been playing accordion for a little while. And people were telling me, oh, you need a good publicity photo of yourself. And I hated the idea of having a publicity photo. So I took off my clothes and sat in a corner, like as if it were an insane asylum, and clutched this accordion. That image was not connected to the image of my mother, of Sayumi, in any way. And you put those things together. And that's also very, very interesting because I mean, there's some story that's told there about me and the accordion, and security and insecurity vis-a-vis the very important women in my life. And I like it that for me, it raises the question. I don't feel that you are trying to teach me something with this, or that you're pointing a finger or anything, or moralizing, but it raises a certain psychological constellation that's very interesting. And I'm kind of amazed that you were able to see that. So, if we would say that the painting on the far left, the first painting, is kind of, the first big set of questions in my life that have to do with childhood and the end of childhood. And then the painting on the far right is the second big set of questions in my life that have to do with being a young man and what kind of a person am I going to become. That's very interesting. The pink on the childhood, if I go into interpreting that, it's also this kind of rosy childhood quality of hope and possibility, and also a little bit creepy, that color. Um, but there's some sort of a sense of, I don't know, innocence and youth about it. And then on the right, of course, there's this black circle, which is a black hole, and I mean all the things in that are set up in that, with clutching and accordion and possibly fear of the women, and that are really the black, deep, dark challenges that I think I and many men have to go through in their lives, of deciding who they are as an adult, and who they are vis-a-vis their mothers, and vis-a-vis their partners, and all of that. And that's scary, very scary. And the black quality of this circle, I think, in a way resonates that kind of fear for me. And then to come back to the middle, there's this sun. Now, to be totally honest, I don't feel that I have achieved the state of being that is represented in that
Not
final
yet. Not
painting.
yet.
But that's what I'm aiming for, right? And it would be like, this is the happy ending to aim for. And I'm very happy to have that in front of me, because it's something it's a guide, for me now. It's what I would like to be. So
Like it's like yourself of the future talking to you.
yeah, that's exactly, and that's very helpful to have. So this self being in the middle there says to me, it says sort of, don't worry, Alan, even with all of this chaotic constellation of childhood and the constellation of young adulthood, there's a way to this point in the future, and you're on your way to that point in the future. That's what it feels like to me. So it,
Amazing.
yeah, so it feels reassuring to me. It feels inspiring to me. It gives me something that I want to strive to live up to. Um, and But it doesn't suppress the contradictions or the conflicts either. It shows the contradictions and conflicts, and then without telling a simplified story about how does that all lead to this image of integration at the end. It just says there is a way to get there, and I love that. How do you go from a photograph to this? What's your process that allows you to go from a photograph? I mean, for example, on the these two paintings that we just discussed, the bottom right and the bottom left, those are many different photographs that you decided to put together that way. That wasn't just one photograph. So you selected from the different photographs, you created a collage, even though they're not even necessarily from the same time period, and you
Yes.
put this together. How did you make decisions about colors and which photographs to go for, and that circle and all of that? How did you go into that?
It wasn't something that I've planned in advance. So, and that's, by the way, something that happens very often. I go through a process of trial and error. So I see what works and what doesn't work.
Hmm.
I look a lot at other artists as well. For example, and I see also which kind of materials and what's available to me at the moment, in the moment. So I had, for example, the second panel, the one with the black circle. I remember that I was trying to put together drawing and painting practices, which is something I don't do very often. But I'm very inspired. I mean, I often take inspiration from other artists as well, and there is this artist called Francis Picabia, or Picabia. I'm not sure how you pronounce the surname, and he does that a little bit. He like draws with the brush, and he overlaps figures, but he keeps them very simple. They're not realistic portraits. And I had at the time this black that wasn't really black paint. It was the surface, what you put on the surface to prepare the canvas. And somehow I put that and it dried very quickly. And I have decided to transfer, to do a line drawing with tracing paper and carbon paper onto that surface, which is something I've never done before. But I don't know why I had the idea. I just thought that in this way I could keep the feeling of the drawing and the fragility of the drawing and the fact that it's much more precise the line are more precise than when you use a brush and when you paint. So I did that, and then I kind of kept most of it because that is the gray layer that you see on the faces. And then with the black paint, I've actually created everything else. I worked on the negative, what's called the negative space in technical terms. I found that, you see, you said that you're scared of that one a bit, and I found it a little bit scary because I was doing things that I had no idea how they were going to turn out. And that's when I do I think that you can tell when an artist has taken a lot of risks, because something really different from everything else comes out. And it's, it a bit scary, both for the artist and for who sees the work. Um, so I don't know. I found it very attractive and magnetic, even if it was a bit scary. Like I didn't want to run away from that
Right.
strong, uncomfortable feeling. I didn't want to turn it into like a more pleasing feeling because that was, I think, to me, it was the quality of this piece. And I try to respect what comes out in a process when I see that has a purpose to exist. So I left it and I actually enhanced it.
Yeah. No, I like that very much. And one of the things that I want to point out, to move away from sort of the psychological side of this for a second, is when I look at these paintings together, I'm just noticing this now, actually. I see they're very interesting geometrical formal structures that unite them, that kind of help pull them together. So, for example, and
Triangle. Yeah.
triangle, it's amazing. So, I mean, if we look at the painting on the left, I mean, actually, the my sister and I at the bottom right and left of the painting, and then my head, that forms a triangle, right? So that the image is a triangle inside of a circle, inside of a square, and because of the circle and the square, we also have four triangles around the circle, right? All the corners, the edges are also triangles, right? The space between the circle and the frame, the triangles with a curved line.
Yeah, yeah, true.
And then the one on the far right is also has basically a triangular form, which is I mean it's the same geometrical form as the one
Talking
on the
about
far left.
talking about shapes, I think there are loads of repetitions in this
Yes.
work, even if they are very subtle. They're not like clear repetitions, and there are patterns of three,
Yeah.
a bit like in klezmer music. I was thinking
Yes.
that's you have repetitions, but they are repetition with a lot of variations in them, and then you have three sections, and then in both of the groups of work, you have a third section, and is actually like a sort of flourishing of the idea, a synthesis of the narrative, which is exactly what happens with the golden section in klezmer music.
Yeah, that's amazing that you say that. And that happens also in not only in the final section of pleasure music, but it happens in many cases in the piece itself, you know. Like for example, the first thing that just occurs to my mind, in the piece, sorry, I kind of skipped out of my mind for a minute when I said that and lost my what I mean is that it happens on a smaller level in each section, even at the level of a phrase. So you know you have something like dum bum bum, dee 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 dum bum, dee dee dum bum, and that's it right there. It's like one, repeat, and then elaboration on it, and that happens all over the place in Yiddish music. There's something very strong about something, its repetition, and then its elaboration, its development. And this happens in an embedded way. So you can have a phrase like that, and you can have another phrase that's like that, and then you can have a third phrase which is like those two phrases, considered each one of those phrases a thing, and this elaborates on those two phrases. That's a section. And then that section, the second section can be a reflection of that structure. And the third section is elaboration of those two structures. So you have all of these embedded threes. Not every klezmer piece has that, but many, many pieces of Yiddish music do. And I saw that here too, and I think that's really funny and wonderful that you can capture that visually.
Did you notice this before I told you?
Yeah, of course.
Because I did think about it when I've taken these decisions. Like, it's not
Yeah.
something that I connected afterwards. It was part of the intentional choice making.
No,
Okay.
no, I see that, and I also like very much that there's this kind of play of primary, Platonic geometrical like platonic solids, although they're not. They're geometrical forms. But there's the circle, there's the triangle, there's the square. You know, very strong figures, and probably that balances out my chubby cheeks a little bit, which is a good thing because especially the up to the two portraits above, the one below is not so, but the two above have very round Santa Claus-like
I really
cheeks,
like
and
them. I really like them. Probably enhanced it a bit too much, but
yeah,
it's the character that they suggest of
yes.
painting.
This
So
is why some people used to call me, before I lost a little bit of weight, they used to call me Santa Claus in the pleasure music scene because of my chubby cheeks. But you know, I'm trying to imagine if all six of those photos, I'm sorry, if all six of those paintings went with that kind of round quality without these more formal geometric qualities. And I think I wouldn't like it nearly as much. I love the contrast between the quite strict geometrical forms within which this kind of roundness takes place. That's a sort of a dialectic that I really enjoy.
thank you, great. I mean, I like a lot the idea of doing things that are also abstract and geometric and graphic almost with oil paint because it's not what you use oil paint for. So I like to play a
Yeah,
bit with that and do something that it's kind of that's not been done before or not as much. I also feel that you can focus more on colors and on interpretation if things are more abstract. So
yeah,
you don't have the limit of something figurative that represents something that is three-dimensional and that you already know what it looks like in the world. So, but at the same time, I do think that as artists, we need to engage with the world. Like we
yeah.
can't just live on another planet. So it's really important that we also
Well, and you teach a
look at
lot,
the word and communicate with that in order to transform it positively and in
right?
order to have a positive impact on it and vice versa and the opposite.
And you do that as an artist, you do that as a teacher of art, you do that in many, many different ways. So
Did you do that if you're a self-employed person in any field as
not
well?
necessarily. I think not everyone feels that they're called to teaching, and we've had talks about your teaching before, and I know that that's something that you're really passionate about, and that's something that you want to be very, very good at. Um, not everybody feels that way about teaching. Even if they have to teach, they may feel, well, I have to do this, but I'm just trying to get through the time. I know people who think that way about teaching, and that's something very different from that you want the experience that the student has to be the best possible experience they can have, which is I know how you feel about it.